So first off, I just want to say that I'm really proud of everybody here. We've had an amazing first week of the Chabura. Both the men's and the women's Chabura have been very active since we started. Rabbi Nachman made it very clear that for us to achieve our spiritual potential individually, we would also have to have what's called sichot averim, that is conversation with friends, and not specifically about stam things that are going on in your life, but about spiritual things, about encouraging each other, participating and involving in trying to help others on their journey along with you, sharing about yours, and that having friends on your journey is not a ancillary, secondary part of your journey, but that having friends on your journey is actually crucial to you being able to, what we're going to learn is to find the lost princess. This lost princess, we're going to see, has to do with getting to the root of your soul, okay? There's no way to achieve finding the root of your soul if not through help from your friends. You know, like the Beatles said with such wisdom in the 70s. You get by with a little help from your friends. However, not the friends that they spoke about where they help you smoke weed, but our friends, Bezrat Hashem, are going to help us to find Hashem, okay? And this is what Rabbi Nachman says is a real friend, someone who actually brings you closer to the purpose of your life. Like for instance, just as an example, Rabbi Nachman got married when he was 13 years old. So most of the people from the Baal Shem Tov's era, they got married that young, especially people who came from lineage like Rabbi Nachman, you know. The women were lining up for him because of his unbelievable yichus. So at his wedding though, he took it very, very seriously, that this was a day that was not just going to change his life because he's getting married now, but that it was going to change his life because, like the Chazal say, a person doesn't have Torah until he's married. And they also speak about the fact that when a person gets married, his slate is wiped clean. No matter what he has done in his life, everything is forgiven, and he's able to start over again completely. So Rabbi Nachman was very, very deeply meditating on his wedding day, and he left the wedding in the middle to go think about Hashem. And he saw somebody come out of the wedding, and Rabbi Nachman used to do this a lot. He would try to test people to see where they were at spiritually. So he would make comments to them to encourage them to do otherwise, to see how strong their resolve was. So he said to this boy Shimon, why don't you go back into the wedding? Why don't you go back in? It's a big celebration. So he said, no, I'm not interested in these things. I wanna be closer to Hashem. So Rabbi Nachman said, oh, we're going to be good friends. So this is what we're saying. What's a good friend? Someone who brings you close to Hashem. It happens to be that ended up becoming Rabbi Nachman's first chassid, first disciple, and he was his student his whole entire life. And this was Shimon, okay? So Bezrat Hashem, we should be good friends to each other. So first I just want to say kol kavod to everybody here, Yisher koach, for being so active in the groups. We need to continue to do that more and more and get closer and closer. The more friendship that we have with each other, the more love there is between the groups and companionship, the more we're going to be able to find the lost princess, okay? Second, I'm sure everyone here knows that Rav Chaim Kanievsky passed away Friday. His neshama should have an aliyah. His levaya is today in Yerushalayim. I was actually in the middle of his potadus, and I felt it was a little heavier than usual going into Shabbat. And then afterwards, I turned on the radio. There's a kosher radio station in Israel, and I heard somber music playing, which is very unusual going into Shabbat. And then when I got home, I saw something went out to everybody that Rav Kanievsky passed away. So I was very shocked. You know, he's one of the few people that is considered a living tzaddik, someone who everybody reveres. And to see him pass away in our lifetime, I remember when Rav Moshe Feinstein passed away, my rabbi, Rav Walken, said that everybody at the time understood that there was a world with Rav Feinstein, with Rav Moshe Feinstein, and then there's a world without him. and it's two different worlds. And I imagine that with the same thing as with Rav Kanievsky. So, B'ezrat Hashem, there should be an aliyah of his neshama to see people like us, who a lot of us have started so far, and are still so far, and are trying so hard to get so close. I'm sure he'd be very proud of us. So B'ezrat Hashem, should be an aliyah of the neshama for him. And with that, we're going to begin The Lost Princess. So Rabbi Nachman says like this. Anav Amar, he spoke up and he said, when did he speak up and say this? It was 1806. Rabbi Nachman was around 34 years old, and he had been teaching his Hasidim now for 6 years in Breslov, and a little bit more than that if they found him in Medvedevka before that, for the 2 years that he struggled there with the Shpol Zaidi, who's going to come up later. Towards the end of his life, starting when he was about 34 years old, for the last 4 years of his life, he reoriented his mission with his students. And he stopped only teaching them very deep Torah lessons, as well as very simple Torah lessons. He also began telling stories. And like he said explicitly, you're not listening to the Torah, it's not waking you up. So I'm going to have to just start telling you stories. And Rabbi Nachman explains in the 60th lesson of Likutei Moharan that there are people who they fall asleep. And he brings a specific reason there, but you could fall asleep spiritually for a number of reasons. Like we're going to see in this story, this is alluded to multiple times within the story, the concept of mochin the katnut, the concept of falling asleep. And Rabbi Nachman explains in that lesson, as well as in this story, it's very difficult for a person who falls asleep to wake back up. It's not just like a person, he takes a nap and then someone wakes him up already, that you wake up, your eyes are red, you feel foggy, you feel not oriented, but spiritually to fall asleep, it's very difficult to wake back up. But Rabbi Nachman says that if a true tzaddik tells stories from ancient times, this can wake a person who's fallen asleep for a long time up. In fact, even a person who slept for 70 years, Rabbi Nachman says, can wake up from stories from ancient times. So, when did he say this? He said this when he was 34. And he saw that a lot of his students were actually much further than he originally anticipated, and so were the Jewish people, and they would be into the near future. So he started telling stories. So he spoke up and he said, when did he speak up and he said this? It was right after Shabbat Nachamu. So between Rosh Hashanah, after Tisha B'Av, after the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, we have Tisha B'Av. So every year we mourn over the loss of the Beit HaMikdash, and then that next Shabbat we call it Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat of comfort, because we start to speak about the Nevuah of Yeshaya, where he speaks about the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash and the comfort of the Jewish people, that Hashem comforted us afterwards. And this is the way of Hashem, that we go through difficulties and challenges in our life that need to take place, but then afterwards he's there to comfort us. That's also alluded to in this story. So really, this is speaking about Nachamu. This is speaking about comfort. And we see that the root of Rabbi Nachman, his name, Nachman, means comfort, to be the comforter. Okay? And that's obviously what he embodied maybe more than anything. Anav Amar, he spoke up and he said, B'derech siparti maseh. B'derech, on the way, I told this story. Shekol mi shaya shama, that everyone who heard this story, hayalo hira tshuva, he had a thought, he had a inner movement towards wanting to go back to Hashem, wanting to return to the root of his soul, wanting to reconnect spiritually, wanting to achieve the purpose of his life. V'zohi, and this is the story that I told. Now, fascinatingly, the writer of this sefer, he brings that this cannot mean what it sounds like it means according to its pshat, because he was in Medvedevka at the time. There was a time every year around the time of Shabbat Nachamu that Rabbi Nachman would visit 3 different cities every year in Ukraine, and he usually would teach Torah over there. But on this trip, he didn't teach Torah to anybody. He didn't go anywhere to speak to somebody. And yet he said that no matter where I went and told this story, everybody wanted to go back to Hashem after that. So it's fascinating because He didn't seemingly tell this story to anybody. Okay? So now the commentator explains that towards the end of Rabbi Nachman's life, he switched his focus from not just trying to help people who were alive, but actually trying to rectify the neshamot, the souls of people who had passed away. So Rabbi Nachman's seemingly not just speaking about the tikkun of souls that were alive, but also souls that would be in the future, and also souls that had passed away. As he says here, that he was alluding to the fact that he was affecting tremendous rectifications for Jewish souls. Sorry, 1 second. Just letting people in. Okay. Avur drachim shemahalchim behem nefeshot Yisrael. That the reason he went on this trip was that he should rectify the souls of people who had passed away. That they should be able to reach their final destination in peace. In Kabbalah, in the Zohar, it speaks a lot about the fact that after a person passes away, there are certain things that need to take place for that person to actually reach their final destination. Obviously, one of those things simply is that the person actually gets buried. Unfortunately, Chaval, many people in our generation, in our own personal families, knows Jewish people that have been either embalmed or chas v'shalom, they've been incinerated, and this is not lotov. This is not good. Part of a person being able to get to the place that he needs to go to is that he's actually physically buried. Okay. So there's many things besides that on not just on a simple level that allow a person to be able to go to the place they need to go to in peace. And Rabbi Nachman was very busy trying to help people who had passed away who were not able to get to that final destination in peace. And this was the story that he said he told in order to help those people do so. Okay? Now listen to the language, because Rabbi Nachman said every letter, every word that he said in these stories were b'diuk. And just as a disclaimer, you might see me stop after every few words and start to explain. I'm not trying to slow us down, but this is not for speed reading. This is for people who really want to delve deeply into these stories. The amount of meaning that's in every single few words, you can spend an hour on. So we are not trying to finish the race. Like my Rabbi, Rav Watkins, said as a joke about Daf Yomi, that you do a daf every day in the Gemara, which is an amazing thing. But my Rabbi said as a half joke, you'll be done before you know it, right? That's what they say. You'll be done before you know it. So, but he's saying, you'll be done and then you won't know it because you're spending a very quick time going through each thing. So by the time you're done, you don't actually know it. So we're not trying to be done before we know it. We want to just really try to soak it in. So, Bezrat Hashem, I'm only going to spend time on things that I believe are very important for us. But I will spend a considerable amount of time on different fundamental points, okay? One is this word, baderech, okay? On this path, I told this story. He could have just said, I told this story. So what's baderech? So Rabbi Nachman's student here, he says, Shehu tikkun anikra derech. That Rabbi Nachman alludes to the tikkun, the rectification, the healing of a Jewish soul as the derech. And like he speaks about in Torah Vav, which in many ways is one of his most famous Torahs, Shesod hatshuva hu bechinat hanotem b'yam darcha. That it says over there that Hashem created a path in the sea. And Rabbi Nachman's alluding over there to the concept of returning to Hashem, just as a little bit of a summary of that lesson so we can understand what this Talmud is going to explain. Rabbi Nachman explains over there that for a person who really wants to be close to Hashem, which Bezrat Hashem we all want to do, that person needs to wait. Why does that person need to wait? Because that person needs to create a path, Rabbi Nachman explains. There's a path that that person needs to create in order that he should be able to find Hashem. It's not enough to just go looking. There needs to be a derech, there needs to be a path. How is that path created? So Rabbi Nachman explains, Tzarich sheyeh lo shnei b'kiyut. For a person to truly get back to the root of his soul, to find the source of reality, to find the one who created him, he needs to be able to have two types of expertise. Baki beratzo, baki v'shov. When Yaakov Avinu had a dream about the ladder, he saw there were malachim that were going up and down the ladder. So Rabbi Nachman explains that what is this referring to? What is this alluding to? They were going ratzo v'shov. They were running and they were returning. So the fact that the malachim were doing this was an allusion to how is it that a person gets close to Hashem. They need to run and return. And this is a very, very important concept that Kabbalah speaks about a lot, Chassidut talks about a lot. And this lesson is fundamental for us. Because a person usually attempts to do these two different states in a way which actually brings them further away from the goal. One of the main things that Chassidut brings is paradigm shifts, especially with Rabbi Nachman's Torah. That whatever you thought you knew, or however you usually adjusted or responded to different moments or events in your life, that you respond differently. Because the way that we naturally do it is not effective. It actually usually is a barrier. And this is why Rabbi Nachman says that we were giving true tzaddikim. They should be able to create a path for us, to know how to be able to deal with and respond to the different events in our life in a way which brings us closer to Hashem. So now Rabbi Nachman says like this, that there's two types of expertise a person needs to go to Hashem. He needs to know how to run, and he needs to know how to return. Meaning, meaning a person needs to strengthen himself always on going and running this path to Hashem. Bein ba'aliyah, bein b'yerida. Whether he's having a spiritual ascent or whether he's having a descent. Hainu, meaning, bein she'izkeh le'ez, whether he merited to some type of spiritual elevation. Le'ez madrega gedola. He now is knowing Hashem in a deeper way. He's feeling a deeper type of closeness to Hashem. He has more hope now. He heard something that gave him chizik, that gave him encouragement, that made him feel like, oh, there's meaning to everything that I've been through in my life. And now I want to get closer. There's something that's been lifted. That's an aliyah. Afapiken aliyah modsham. Now Rabbi Nachman says over there that the nature of a person who has a spiritual aliyah is that he wants to stay there, right? If you can imagine, you've been struggling for a long time, and then all of a sudden, you start to come across Rabbi Nachman's teachings, and you're like, you like breathe. I've been through all of this for a reason. Hashem loves me. And you start to feel like this aliyah, or you go to Eretz Yisrael for the first time. You have an aliyah. You go to Uman for Rosh Hashanah for the first time. You have an aliyah. You learn a certain sefer, a book for the first time, and it adds and deepens meaning to things that you have in your life. You have an aliyah. The nature of that type of person, Rabbi Nachman says, is to get comfortable, right? As soon as I have an aliyah, I'm going to chill. What would that look like in 2022? Take out my phone, watch hours and hours of YouTube videos. Somebody sends me a news article. I start perusing that article, and that leads to me looking at other news articles and then looking at the comments and going on for a long period of time. My friend calls me. He's like, hey, you want to go to the bar tonight? And you just had this aliyah. So you could take this opportunity to actually get so close to Hashem because of the inspiration that you have. But because you finally feel peace, you finally feel joy, you finally feel happy, you finally find relief, you now decide that I'm going to go chill with my friend, right? And we could plug in all these number of different things. Rabbi Nachman says this is a grave error. This is a big mistake. Because the whole reason you're having the spiritual aliyah, and what Rabbi Nachman explains is called mochin de gadlut, an expansive mind, is that you should be able to utilize that expanded mind to get closer to Hashem. Okay? So when you feel good, meaning simply, when you feel happy, when you feel clarity of mind, when you feel purpose in your life, when you feel hopeful, when you feel joy, when you feel explorative. This is a good way to know, am I in mochin de gadlut? Do I feel like I want to grow? Do I feel like I want to explore? Do I want to tinker with things in my life? Do I want to consider transformation in different areas of my life? Am I excited to do this? So that's called mochin de gadlut. That's called expansive mind. And in this place, Rabbi Nachman says, you must run after Hashem. Learn as much as you can. Talk to Hashem and Hibodedut as much as you can. Read different svarim that are going to help you to elevate your mind. That when you feel good, this is the time to run to Hashem. So this is called becoming baki baratzo, becoming expert in running. Not to stand in your place. Not to stay where you are because you feel like, oh, I realize now, I got it. You shouldn't be satisfied with where you are. That only through this he should be very expert. That he should know and he should believe. He needs to go higher and higher. Rabbi Nachman says, how can it be that tzaddikim are bali tshuva as well? Because Rabbi Nachman explains in this Torah, a person needs to do tshuva al tshuva. He needs to continue to grow and to elevate. But a person, for instance, he grew up very connected. He grew up in a family which they gave him the Torah in an authentic, genuine way. And from birth, they were like inculcated in this spiritual life. What are they doing tshuva on? What are they consistently growing through? So Rabbi Nachman explains that they're doing tshuva on their prior conception of God. Okay, it's a very deep thing. They had a conception of Hashem, and that conception was true at their level. But then they learned something new, something deeper, something more genuine, something more real. And then they realize that what they know now in comparison to what they knew yesterday is greater. They know Hashem in a greater way today than yesterday. So they do tshuva on their, what is now considered a diminished concept of Hashem from the day before. Their concept of God that was lesser yesterday, even though at that level it was the highest possible. What does it mean simply for us? It means for us like this. Hashem is infinite. So one of the most beautiful, most exciting parts about the spiritual journey is that there is no end to getting closer. This is baderech. You're on the path. Why are you on the journey? You're always baderech. Because a person can never actually get to the destination completely. To be at the destination means I don't stop moving towards it. It's about the journey. That I constantly move closer towards it. And not to think that I understand now and I'm ready to rock and roll. You definitely are doing good because you're learning more and you're connecting more. But never to get comfortable in your spiritual growth, never to get old like we spoke about in the last lesson. Then Rabbi Nachman goes on to say, this is the concept of being expert in running. But now also the opposite. And this is one of the ways in which Rabbi Nachman was so mechadesh. He was so novel in dealing with when you're going down. Shafilu imipo, that even if you fall, chas v'shalom, l'makom shiful, to whatever place you fell to, afilu b'sha'ot tachtiyut, and this is where Rabbi Nachman strengthened and emphasized more than anybody, even if you're living in hell. And he doesn't mean it figuratively. You're in the midst of a major depressive episode for a long period of time. You're dealing with addiction and withdrawal. You're homeless. You have no money to be able to support yourself. You're struggling with your friends, with your family, with your parents. You everything that you thought you knew has been turned in a tizzy, right? Everything was moving towards a certain way. This happens to many people. They grow up and things are looking very hopeful. They're excited about all the different prospects in their life. And then all of a sudden, there's like 3 events that take place within a short amount of time. It completely rocks their world. And they have no idea who they are or where they're going, right? For me personally, to be depressed for many years, not be able to get out of my bed, crying every single day from being so depressed, not being able to support my family, to make money, having to watch my wife take care of my family living in a foreign country, right? having brain fog, not being able to think clearly, thoughts that I want to have. And the list goes on and on. Everybody knows in their own heart what it looks like to go down. Or it could be even not so much as that. Just, I did an avera, right? I watched something I shouldn't have watched. I listened to something I shouldn't have heard. I spoke negatively about another Jew. I wasted seed, right? All of these different things that Rabbi Nachman's going to speak about, right? I did something that in retrospect I wish I hadn't done. That's also an arida. That's also a descent. But now Rabbi Nachman says all the way to the fact that you're living in hell. Okay? Rabbi Nachman says you need to be bucky. You need to become expert in being in that space as well. Gam ken al ye'esh atzmo l'olam. That you should not despair yourself in that space. Rabbi Nachman used to say that even if I ended up doing things which brought me down to Gehenna, to hell, I would have no yeyush, I would have no despair. Why? Because Gam Sham, Hashem Yisbarach is there. Also Hashem is there. Hashem's also in Gehenna. And this was the chiddush of Rabbi Nachman, that no matter where you are, not abstractly, not in a transcendental way, but in a very way that's near to you, like Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Jewish people, it's so near to you, it's so close to you, that even when you're struggling, even when you're down, even when it's been a long time, maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe years, and you're totally confused and overwhelmed, Hashem is there. So as opposed to the first way that I'm becoming expert in running, that is that I'm moving towards Hashem, there's an upward movement. In this place, the expertise does not come with running. It comes with holding your ground. Simply not budging. If you can imagine, like there's a hurricane, and you see this wind comes and it starts sweeping everything off the ground. Trees start flying in the air. Buildings start flying. Everything is moving. That this is what it's like when you go down. And most people, Rabbi Nachman says, they don't try to hold on to anything. They just get swept up with the wind. And they go way far back, right? And they just keep going and going and going and hoping privately sometime it's going to stop. Rabbi Nachman said, it's not the way. When you're going down, the way is to hold on. It's not the time to grow. That's right. That's why you feel negative like this. It's not the time to expand. That's why you don't feel like doing so. But it's also not the time to fall all the way down. It's the time to literally just hold on wherever you're at. You know, you can imagine, Rabbi Nachman alludes to this in the first Torah of Likutei Moharan, like an ocean. You have a huge wave that's coming towards you. A person who's a surfer, he knows that when the wave comes, I simply need to stay where I'm at. Even if it comes over me, right? Even if I fall off my surfboard, I stay where I'm at. Why? Because that wave eventually is going to pass over me. And there's going to be calm waters after that. But a person who doesn't know any better, he sees that wave and he gets off the beach entirely. He leaves the ocean entirely because he thinks this is going to be forever. Or he's overwhelmed. He thinks that this is too much for him to bear, to go through. Rabbi Nachman says it's lo tov, it's not good. That wave is there for you because you're ready to get to the next level. So for you to get to the next level, you need to simply hold your ground. Stay where you are. Don't move. Hold on. Okay? So this is also the opposite. Because Rabbi Nachman says in this space, most people, like we just said, they allow themselves to fall into what's called yeyush. And this was Rabbi Nachman's big proclamation to everybody. Ein shum yeyush ba'olam klal. Now, even though this has become a song, and even though people sing this together, and is a source of hope and joy for a lot of people, Rabbi Nachman said this in a Torah lesson. Which means that this is not just chizuk, encouragement. This is a fact. There is no such thing as despair at all. And therefore Rabbi Nachman says, you're not allowed. It's asur to ma'ayish yourself. It's asur to cause yourself to despair, because there is none. Okay? So as a result of that, you need to hold on. And that's the expertise of being in a place of falling. You know, growing up, when I used to go through difficult things in my life, when I had all of these depressive episodes, I would sink into it. I would start listening to sad music. I would go into my room and lock the door. I wouldn't speak to anybody. I would start wearing like really like schwer clothing, right? And I just kind like almost like I'm going to like a sad movie. Let me just enjoy this. I'm gonna get popcorn, I'm gonna get Coke, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna really let myself feel this wonderful experience of feeling like crap, just feeling completely terrible. And I'm not gonna let anybody know about it. That's what I did my whole life. So by the time that I got married and I started having kids, I didn't know another way to deal with depression. I didn't know another way to deal with struggle but to crawl up into a ball. And Rabbi Nachman teaches, no, you're not allowed to do that. As soon as you start to feel like that, you simply need to hold on. Hold on to where you're at, and it will pass. It's going to move on. It's not the time now to let go completely. Now is the time to take what you learned while you felt good and apply it even though it doesn't make sense to you now. Like for instance, when people come to, I used to be a mental health therapist. So when a person comes to get mental health treatment and they're depressed, one of the first things that I used to do with my clients, which I was taught a lot about, was called acting even without feeling. That when they would come in and they would talk about how depressed they were, you would ask them, what did you do when you weren't depressed? So they'd say, I used to hang out with my friends, I used to play sports, I used to read books, I used to go on walks, I used to work out, all these different things that I used to do when I felt good. I used to eat regularly, drink regularly, sleep, right? And they would teach you, and this is what I tell my clients, I want you for this week to do those things that you did when you felt good, even though you have no interest, you don't feel like doing them at all right now. And at the end of the week, come back to me and tell me how you felt, okay? What would happen about 90% of the time is after that first week, they would have a lift of the depression. They would have a lift from their sadness by simply doing the things that they did when they felt good, even though they don't want to, even though they don't feel like doing it now. Now they have all types of psychological reasoning for this, why this is helpful for people. But the emet is what Rabbi Nachman is teaching. That when the person goes down, this is the time to apply what you learned when you were up, even though you don't feel like it right now. To act as if Hashem is with you right now, even though you don't feel it right now. That's the concept of holding on. And this is how you successfully move through the terrain of going down. To know that Hashem is with you. But tamid yechapes vivakesh et Hashem yiparach. That in the place of your going down, you're always searching and you're always rummaging in that space of darkness for Hashem. V'yechazek atzmo b'chol makom shehu. And that you need to strengthen yourself in every way and in every place that Hashem is with you in that space. B'chol mashecho, whatever degree that you're able to. Ki gam b'sha'ot tachtiyot nimsa Hashem yiparach. Like Rabbi Nachman says, and they turned it into a song, because Gam Sham, because even there in that place, Yecholin, you need to know, even in hell, Hashem is there. V'gam Sham Yecholin Nidabek et Atzmo Alav Yiparach. That even there you're able to have the vekus with Hashem. You're able to cling to Hashem. You're able to achieve a state of oneness and unity with Hashem. You're able to find Hashem in that place too. This is the concept of becoming expert in returning. Why is Rabbi Nachman teaching us about these two extreme states? This state of being on fire and exciting and wanting to grow, and this state of being in this very dark place that I've never found myself in. This tremendous struggle, this feeling of being overwhelmed and confused, sad, scared, whatever, you put in any adjective you want. Because Rabbi Nachman says that when a person is Jewish and they're secular, the Yetzer Hara, the Sitra Achra, is not worried about them, because everything that they're doing is giving over koach to the Sitra Achra, is giving koach to the other side, and therefore you're feeding the dog, so he's happy, and he doesn't give you any problems. But as soon as a person, b'schut, some merit, decides that he wants to get close to Hashem be'emet, in truth, and for sure, mostly, specifically, when he starts learning the teachings of Chassidus, and then all the way to the teachings of Rabbi Nachman, that this person is going to go up and down a lot. He's going to go up and down a lot. He's going to have tremendous highs and he's going to have tremendous lows. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid, Rabbi Nachman says. Because this is part of being close to Hashem. Now that the Yetzer Hara knows that you actually want to do it, and you found the greatest guide to be able to elevate truly, to find and experience the purpose of your life, to actualize all of your potential, to achieve that which you were brought to this world for, you now have the tools with which to be able to achieve that, and you're moving towards doing so. So Rabbi Nachman explains that just like an enemy, right as he's about to go extinct, gets very nervous, and no matter how weak he is, he starts to pull out a full-on assault. That full-on assault is only happening to the person because he knows he's about to go extinct. To know that, so that when you get pulled down, to hold your ground. Because if you wait long enough, and the Sitra Achra sees that you do not leave from your place, you don't get scared from what's going on in your life and retreat completely, then you're going to be able to continue to move forward, and the descent itself, like the Baal Shem Tov teaches, is going to turn into the greatest aliyah itself. That from the descent, like Rabbi Nachman teaches on a pasuk in Tehillim, it says, "B'tzar b'chaftali." In the tsar, in the constriction, b'chaftali, you created an expanse for me. So the simple understanding of this is that no matter what you go through, Hashem afterwards is going to create an expanse. He's going to take you out of that place. But Rabbi Nachman says the secret of this pasuk is that it's bedavka specifically, b'tsar b'chaftali, in the tsar itself, from the suffering itself, from the mochin the katnut, from the constricted mindset that you find yourself in, from the negative emotions, from the negative thoughts, from the negative actions, from the space of darkness which you're constantly fighting with right now, that if you hold your ground, that space itself will become the greatest revelation of godliness that you ever had. From B'tsar, from the Tsar itself, from the constriction, B'charftali. Hashem makes an expanse from the Tsar itself. And this is a paradox, because the whole concept of Tsar, constriction, means it's limited. B'charfta, this is a rochev, this is a expanse, that's the opposite of constriction. And yet this is the wonder of Hashem, that He can take the most limited time in your life, the most limited experience that you've had, the time that you felt most pressed and most crushed, and if you deal with it in the correct way, that can literally turn into the greatest expanse that you ever had spiritually. To be able to become Baki in running and returning. Rav Natan, the one who codified all of Rabbi Nachman's teachings, he had a lot of running and returning, like all of us do. He really wanted to be close to Hashem his whole life. And he struggled. He grew up in a traditional Jewish family where everything was about learning Gemara. And he felt like something was missing in his life. He felt like there was something lacking. He didn't feel that this hole inside of him was being satiated. And he saw that there was this movement going on of these unusual people that they called themselves Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, the students of the Baal Shem Tov. And he saw that when they prayed with a lot of energy. He saw that when they learned with a lot of joy. He saw that they seemed to be hanging out with each other in a way which was loose and which was exciting, and it wasn't so heavy and serious. And he was intrigued by what was going on. At the same time, he was hearing from everybody that this was a new cult. This was not Judaism. So he stayed away from it, like most people do. But then ultimately, because he felt this lacking and this longing for so long, he couldn't take it anymore. And he decided to see what was going on over there. And he had a tremendous aliyah. He had a tremendous spiritual ascent when he started to hear the teachings of Chassidut, like happens for most of us. Oh my gosh, that the getting close to Hashem is not just about learning information. It's a very deep spiritual journey, and there's so many different elements to it, and it's so beautiful, and it's so sweet, and it's like unbelievable. You have an aliyah. But then what ended up happening is he understood that he needed to find the tzaddik that he connected to. He needed to find the root of his soul. So he starts to look around for different Hasidic masters to find who is his Rebbe that he can cling to, that he can connect to, that can guide him. You know, lahavdil, like in sports, you need that great coach to be able to bring out the best in you. Many people think to themselves, when they start hearing Rabbi Nachman's teachings, or the teachings of Chassidus, this is going to be a big impediment to myself becoming myself. Why? Because it seems to be all about the spiritual guide, and not about me anymore. However, the paradox is, and it's not really such a paradox if you think about it, that it's through this tremendous tzaddik that I'm going to become my fullest self. And let's say, lahavdil, in the sports world, nobody feels threatened by the fact that I have a coach, if they're healthy and they're normal, that wants and is being paid in order for me to become my greatest self. However, when we see people who have attained this level of being able to get close to Hashem, we find ourselves being threatened by this. But what about me? His whole effort is to help you be you all the way. So Rav Natan starts going around, and he finally finds himself by the greatest Hasidic master of the time, Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. The Rav of Berdichev. And most people at that point would be so thrilled. I found who's called the guardian of Israel. He finds the good points in everybody. He's a deep Hasidic master. He has a tradition straight from the Baal Shem Tov. Even still to this day, they're writing books about him. Who would be happier than Rav Natan than to be by the feet of Rav Levi Berdichev? And yet, he had this aching feeling like he still hadn't found it yet. But he didn't want to pay attention to that part of him because he had already sacrificed so much to get to this point that I just want it to be over with. I don't want to have to keep looking. I want to just be settled and to move forward. And it was Motzi Shabbos like we're in right now. And Rav Levi asked Nassin, who he loved. He cherished him, he used to call him Nassala. He said, Nassin, please, can you go get bagels for us so we can have Malava Malka? And in Chassidut, it's a big deal to do Malava Malka. And you have your Rebbe's asking you to go do it, so you should be so happy. And he starts going to get bagels for his Rebbe. And he gets the bagels, he has them in his hands. And he has a hirhur of tshuva. He has a moment where he's completely honest with himself. And he looks down at the bagels and he looks up at the sky. And he said, is this all you came down to the world for? That you should get bagels? And he's looking at the bagels. He said, is this what Hashem brought me here for? That I should get bagels? That's what I'm here for? And he starts crying. And he's crying and he's crying and he's crying. And he can't stop crying. And he falls asleep from his tears. And he has a dream. And in this dream, he's climbing this ladder. And every time he climbs up a step, he falls down on the floor. The next time he climbs, he gets higher, but he falls back down lower this time now. He gets up again and he gets even higher, and this time he crashes down on the floor in the worst way, and he can't get up at all, and he's just laying on the floor crying. And all of a sudden, there's this figure that comes from the top of the ladder, and he says, Nasala, my sweet dear son, climb, but hold on. Right after that, he heard from his good friend that there was a certain young Hasidic master, this dynamic figure that had moved from Mevedevka and originally from Mezhibush, the great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, and he had moved to Breslov, which is right next to Nemrov. His name was Nachman. And he was hyping him up about Rabbi Nachman and what he'd heard about him, what he saw when he went to go visit him after he moved there. He said, you're not going to believe what's going on over there. It's something I've never seen before. They have such fire when they pray. They have such fire when they learn. They're literally running to God. So Rav Natan was like, oh, maybe this is a sign from heaven, right? Now he's not in Mevedevka, which is very far from me. He's in Breslov, which is right next to me. But he had also heard a lot of negative things about Rabbi Nachman, right? Just like he had heard about Chassidut before. So he was a little bit apprehensive, but finally, because he had this aching again, he couldn't quench this aching, and he went over to see Rabbi Nachman for the first time. And he told Nassin, oh, my dear friend, we haven't seen each other in so long, but we're really such good friends. But we've known each other for a very long time. Okay? Rav Natan ended up recognizing and realizing afterwards that was the figure in his dream. It was Rabbi Nachman on top of the ladder. And one of the first lessons that Rabbi Nachman taught when Rav Natan was there, which all of the students of Breslov understood, that this lesson was almost in some ways exclusively designed for Rav Natan himself to show him that he would eventually be the carrier of Rabbi Nachman's Torah, the one who would be able to spread this wisdom to the whole world, which Rav Natan didn't know at the time. He just simply was on his journey, on B'derech. He was searching. And that lesson that he gave was lesson 6 in Likutei Moharan, where he said that a person who really wants to be close to Hashem, he needs to become expert in running and returning. That when he runs, he needs to climb the ladder as fast as he can. But when he is struggling, he needs to simply hold on. And then Rav Natan realized that this lesson was him explaining the dream that he had. That he kept going up this ladder and falling down on the ground to the extent that he just wanted to give up. And this figure, who he realized was Rabbi Nachman, was telling him, it's not about stopping climbing. And it's not about giving up. It's about when you are able to climb as fast as you can. And when you find that you can't climb because you're struggling, it's not the time to fall down on the floor and to wallow in that space. Now is the time to just hold on. And this is the 6th lesson of Likutei Moharan. And Rabbi Nachman says it's impossible to walk the path of tshuva, to get back to Hashem, unless you have these 2 levels of expertise. If a person is expert in running but not in returning, he will not find Hashem in his life. If he's expert at returning but he's not expert in running, he's not going to find Hashem in his life. It's only the person who becomes expert in both, he is able to find Hashem. And now Rabbi Nachman explains that from him being expert in both running and returning, he creates a path to Hashem. It's a very deep thing. If you guys remember the Etch-a-Sketch, so you wrote you used that pen and you would write things on it. It didn't exist before, and through your writing it creates a new reality, and then you could shake it up and put it away. So I was thinking to myself when I learned lesson 6 and I taught it to my students recently, it's almost like Etch-a-Sketch, right? You have a situation in which you feel elevated. Maybe after this class, you start to have a feeling of inspiration. Oh, this difficulty in my life is not stam. It's not just happening to me. It's not because of my parents or my friends. It's not because of people, places, and things. Hashem is putting me into a moment of shov, of returning. And this is only that I should be able to hold on, because what happens? If I can hold on successfully, then it's like I created a little bit of a bridge. Like I wrote a little bit of a thing here. And then all of a sudden, what's going to happen to me if I don't give up and I hold on, I'm going to have an aliyah. And when I have an aliyah, Rabbi Nachman says, if I don't do what I want to do now, which is just chill out, go on vacation, because I've been struggling now for the past few weeks. So what do I want to do when I finally feel good? Chill finally, relax, because I'm happy. No, Rabbi Nachman says it's not what you do. Now is the time to run to Hashem. Go to a field and go talk to Hashem for a few hours. Go learn something in Torah that's going to make you feel closer to Hashem. Go push yourself to grow. Now is the time to do that. If you do that, you create more of a bridge. Okay? If you keep going back and forth between running and returning successfully, you create what's called a derech. You create a path to Hashem. And you can imagine like this Etch-a-Sketch, it's created now. Now the interesting thing, the pasuk that Rabbi Nachman brings to substantiate this concept of the derech, is it's in a bayam. And you think about it. Rabbi Nachman makes you think very deeply about things that just you passed over. Why is King David speaking about having a derech, a path in an ocean? There is no path in an ocean. Oh, so now we can understand why it's so hard to get close to Hashem. Because when a person wants to get close to Hashem, he's literally entering into an ocean. When a person goes into an ocean, there is no path. So how does a person traverse an ocean when there's no path to do so? So now Rabbi Nachman says, follow my lead. I realized through my 38 years of toiling every day of my life to get close to Hashem, I found a derech. I used the Etch-a-Sketch. I was able to successfully run and return, and I understand that this is the way to do it. And now all of a sudden, when you're in the ocean, how am I going to get across? Somehow, by when things are smooth, if I swim in the ocean as fast as I can, it creates a bridge. And if when the wave comes, I simply hold my ground and I hold on with all my might and I don't let go and I stay where I'm at. I don't move forward, but I don't move back. I just hold on. I don't go into despair. I don't go into yeyush. I don't think woe is me. I don't wallow. I just hold my ground like a warrior. Then all of a sudden, the bridge is continuing to be built. And I keep going back and forth, and all of a sudden now there's a whole bridge across the ocean. Because the path to Hashem, like we've experienced, but we haven't been able to put words to, it's like entering into a sea that has no destination points. And it's the scariest thing in the world. It's the hardest thing in the world. And many people, like Rabbi Nachman says, they just give up. Because what am I going to do? I have no idea how to do this, and this is so hard. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe this is not the right thing to do. Maybe Hashem doesn't really exist, and that's the reason why it's so difficult. Because there is nothing happening right now. And I've entered into a fantasy world. Or maybe I really do think that this is working. Maybe I do think that Hashem is there. But I still don't know if I'm doing anything correctly. So like somebody, one of my students recently told me, I feel like Rabbi Nachman's a GPS. It's the most beautiful mashal in the world. That's exactly what Rabbi Nachman is to us. He was a living GPS. He's toiled his whole life. Like Rabbi Nachman said at the end of his life, when his students were crying and he was passing away, he said, I don't know why you guys are so upset. I'm going before you. And he didn't just mean that I'm passing away before you, which he did mean. And therefore there's certain things he can do for his students now that he was not physically here. But what he also means is I already made this path for us. I toiled my whole life on my own that I should be able to find the derech, to find the path in the ocean. I've paved this path. It wasn't here before. I smoothed this path. I made it that you should be able to cross it successfully. And there's a way to do it now without any more. You don't have to have mental gymnastics. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean it's going to be a walk in the park. But there is a clear path now. And this is the thing that Rabbi Nachman brought to us. That in 2022, and it should be a huge relief of all of us, we do not have to create a new path. The path is now there. If you can imagine, you've been to a park. When I was in Queens, I had the zchut of finding a great space, one of my students told me about, to do Hipodadut. It was right near my yeshiva. I didn't even know it was there. And it was a park that actually connected two sides of the borough. And in between there was a park, and they had turned it into a path. So there was a path, and on both sides you had trees, grass, flowers. It was really beautiful. And then eventually you got to a bridge, and you can get from one side to the other side. Now, I was thinking about it and preparing for this lesson. Imagine that bridge wasn't there. And I wanted to get from one side to the other. And I see this whole forest. Even though the forest is just as beautiful as when there's a path. But I would never cross it. Because how am I going to get from one side to the other? It's too daunting. It's too overwhelming. I may not be able to get out on the other side or even know that there is a way out on the other side. But if simply by walking down, I see that there's a path from one side to the other, then simply by seeing that there's this path, I'm able to appreciate the beauty of what was previously overwhelming me. I'm able to experience the closeness to Hashem that I can only have in nature in this space that I couldn't before, because before this, it was too daunting for me to even enter into this place because there's no path for me. Rabbi Nachman made it very clear that he toiled his whole life, that until the days of Mashiach, and this is what he meant by my fire is going to burn until Mashiach comes, that I toiled to create a path in the ocean, in the forest, that you no longer have to toil to figure it out. You are going to have to toil to cross it, but you can actually enjoy the journey now because there's a path, okay? And this is what he created. And what is that path? It's becoming expert in running and expert in returning. Rabbi Nachman explains towards the end of this lesson that if you take the gematria of Baki to become expert and you double it, right? Because you need to be Baki in Ratzo, in running, and Baki in Shov, in returning. You'll have the gematria derech, path. Beautiful, right? This is what Rabbi Nachman does all the time. He sends you on this whole entire thing, and then you're like, wow, this has to be, I used to go concerts, Lahavdil. I used to be a big Dave Matthews Band fan. And their songs were 20 minutes long. For people in our generation that we have somebody told me our attention span now is less than 10 seconds. So, but in the right state with that many people, and if you're on maybe certain drugs, so you can get into the mode of listening to a song for 20, 25, 30 minutes sometimes, and entering into a new state of existence, okay? And when you do that with so many people and you have this deep spiritual experience, even though you don't think it's spiritual, and then you're like, wow, it would be, like we said, like we say on Pesach, it would be enough if only this song, I paid just to hear this one song. And then I remember me and my friend would look at each other and be like, oh my gosh, that was only one song. We have 18 more songs. We're going to be here for 3 hours like this. But you can't believe it because that song took you almost through the world and back. You went all the way to one end of existence and came all the way back. You think that that's it. It's enough. And this lahavdil was my experience when I started learning Likutei Moharan. I go through a lesson and he does one section. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my life is going to change. And then I realize that's only the first section of the Torah. And then there's another section of this lesson. And then he takes you in a completely new way. And then you realize there's 12 sections in this lesson. And they all do that to you. And then at the very end, he brings you back to the beginning. And he shows you this beautiful tapestry where he weaved the whole thing together. And then you go, oh my gosh, that was one lesson in Likutei Moharan. There's over 300 lessons like this. And that's only Likutei Moharan. He has all these other svarim. It's unbelievable, okay? So everything that we've discussed right now is only one section in Likutei Moharan. Only one section of one lesson in lesson 6. Becoming expert in running and returning. And then he brings you at the end and he says that's how you create the derech in the ocean. Because derech is the gematria of baki twice. Meaning being able to be expert in running and returning. So, what were we trying to come out of today with? To realize from the get-go, you want to be close to Hashem, and you found Rabbi Nachman's teachings, so you already now have a path. You have a path. You don't anymore have to figure out how to do it, thank God. Now you have to gird your loins, like Rabbi Nachman says, to become an ish milchama, to become a man of war. And you need to learn how to fight. You need to learn how to hold on when you're struggling. And you need to also learn how to run to Hashem when you feel good. Both of these are going to go completely against your nature. When you feel good, you're going to want to relax. When you feel bad, you're going to want to fall down further. Rabbi Nachman says it's bedavka the opposite. If you can force yourself when you feel good to run to Hashem through different spiritual practices, and you can force yourself when you don't feel good to hold on, you will be able to cross the derech, to cross the path. And now we look back, and what does Rabbi Nachman says? Va'nava I spoke up and I said, but derech siparti ma'aseh. But derech, on the derech, I spoke up and I said. Because the only people who are going to be able to hear this story of the lost princess, and it's going to change their life, the only people who are going to be able to be transformed by the spiritual journey that Hashem and Rabbi Nachman are going to take us on in this story, is only the people who are baderech, the people who are on the derech. And to know that these people are going to have to learn how to run and return. Then he says, anybody who hears this story is going to have a hirhur of tshuva. He's going to be able to think to himself, not just that I want to be close to Hashem, but he's going to have a hirhur of tikva. He's going to have a thought of hope. Not only that I want to, but that I can do it. It's possible. That there is a way that I can get close to Hashem. Okay? Bezrat Hashem, next week, we're going to move forward in the story. And again, don't think to yourself, we just did 3 words. That's a mistake. Rav Natan said, this part of lesson 6 in Likutei Moharan, he lived with this his whole life. This was something that throughout the rest of his entire life, he lived with. And all accounts of him corroborate this. That they saw that Rav Natan, after hearing this, he never wasted a moment. That every time he had a free moment and he felt good, they saw he was learning, he was praying, he was teaching, he was writing letters, he was running to Hashem. Even when he went into the mikveh, they said to him, oh my gosh, your rabbi is Rabbi Nachman? What type of kavanot do you have? What type of intentions, Kabbalistic intentions do you have when you go into the mikveh? I can't even imagine. You can't even understand the Arizal without the teachings of Rabbi Nachman. They would say to him, what do you think about when you go in the mikveh? And Rav Natan says, I think about when I'm going to get out. They're like, what? Yeah, as soon as I walk in, what do I think about? When I'm going to leave. What do you mean? What about the intentions? What about the kavanot? What about the deep mystical? No, you know what he was thinking about? Running to Hashem. He ran to the mikveh. He ran out of the mikveh. Why? Because I could do something else now. I feel good. I'm ready to rock. Okay? This is the greatest Kabbalistic intention you can have. Not to think about names of Hashem. Run to Hashem. Do what you can to get close to Hashem. That's the greatest Kabbalistic thing you could do right now. And then they saw as well that when Rav Natan didn't feel good, he didn't do what he used to do the first 22 years of his life, where he would wallow in self-pity. That even when they exiled him outside of his family for years, he was writing letters to people about holding on, never giving up, no matter what you're going through in your life, not to give up. And for the rest of his life, he was this source of tikva, this source of hope for all of Rabbi Nachman's students at that time and all in the future, to us to this day. That if you read Rav Natan's autobiography, which I suggest to anybody to read, Through Fire and Water, you're going to see he mamish went through hell after he met Rabbi Nachman. Okay? And you saw that he took this lesson 6, this one section of lesson 6 that we just spent an hour discussing. And he lived with this his whole life, okay? So for us moving forward, to know that we're going to have to learn how to run and return. And practice, Sometimes you're going to succeed, sometimes you're going to fail. Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not going to work. But the main thing is to know that it exists and to try your best to do so. I'm just going to give one quick example, and then we'll move into questions that anybody may have. So if you have questions, you can write them on the bottom. If you want to ask on the video camera, through audio, you can ask. I'll just say this quick anecdote, and then we'll move into it. This past Friday, the Shabbat, I was really excited. My wife is, Bezrat Hashem, very close to giving birth. She's past due. I was thinking maybe it's going to happen on Shabbat. Wow, it's going to be amazing. My son's going to be born on Shabbat. It was Purim time. I was coming off the high of having Purim, my first Purim in Eretz Yisrael, and it was unbelievable, thank God. I got up very early. I prayed early. I learned early. I ended up having an unbelievable experience. And now we're moving straight into Shabbat right after. So I was on this high. And then all of a sudden, as I was leaving the mikveh, my blood sugar dropped. And this has happened to me in the past. Usually I just have orange juice or banana, and within maybe a few minutes, sometimes 20 minutes, it comes back up, I'm completely fine. But the sugar dropped so intensely when I was just leaving the mikveh with my son that I could barely drive home, and Shabbat was about to start. I walking in the house, stumbling and bumbling in. I said, Linny, I need juice. And then she knew what was happening. I was sweating. My face was red. She goes, come. She gave me juice. And I'm sitting there, and it's not helping me. And I'm starting to get weaker and weaker and weaker. And Shabbat is literally starting. And I chugged the orange juice. And then I was I have to lay down. I can't do Kabbalat Shabbat. I physically I have to lay down. And I laid down, and I was literally laying there, and I couldn't fall asleep either. And I'm just laying there for an hour, sweating through my entire suit and my tzitzit. Any religious Jew knows, you have to take on now to wear 10 more layers of clothing for some reason. So now I'm sweating, and I'm sweating in my bed. An hour like this, trying to get the strength to get up and just daven, even in my house, so that I can my family's waiting for me to eat the su'udah, and I can't get up. My son comes over to me. He goes, Abba, are you okay? I go, yeah, I'm fine. She's like, so what's going on? And I said, I just, my sugar dropped. I'm just waiting for it to come back up. Finally, after an hour, I forced myself to get up to do, to pray. But I didn't feel good at all. And I felt like my brain was co-opted. It was taken from me. I couldn't think my own thoughts. I was starting to feel very bad, and I was starting to feel very negative, and I was starting to feel very scared. It was a horrible feeling. And then finally, it was the time for Kiddush. And my wife's mother was over. And unfortunately, like, she was in the crosshairs of all of this. And usually anyone who knows me, it's very difficult for me to get angry. You know, I struggle very much with sadness, but anger is not something that comes easily to me. It takes a lot. And I just didn't feel like myself at all. And something was said at the table, and I lost myself completely. And I had like a breakdown at the table. And I went on a whole rant. And my wife was looking at me, she's like, David, it's Shabbat. This is really uncomfortable. and I'm like thinking to myself, I was like, I'm so sorry. It's like, it's not me right now. It's not like, this isn't me. She goes, okay, so like, just go lay down, you know, like you don't have. So like, I went to the restroom. I came back out to the table. I said, I'm so sorry. I apologized to her mom. I went to sleep. And usually in the past, how would I deal with something like this? I would feel very bad about myself. Very, very bad about myself. I would beat myself up. I would think to myself about how I looked, you know, how I embarrassed my wife. I would think about the fact of like how I didn't respect my mother-in-law. I was thinking about like going this whole entire, what they would call in psychology, catastrophizing. I would start catastrophizing what happened to me. And that would bring me into that space for a very long period of time. Maybe as a result of that, for that whole week now, I'm knocked out feeling bad about myself. But I've now been working on creating this bridge at running and returning for years now, for half a decade, that when these things pop up, it's like second nature to me to know this is not stam, this is not just happening to me. I was praying in my car, Hashem, please, crying to Hashem, give me new eyes, give me new ears, give me a new heart. Let me be able to see you in a new way. Let me start over again completely. So what did Hashem do? He mamish rocked my world. He completely took away my mind and my heart and everything, which I utilized to get close to Hashem. And it's the meal's over, and I could have so easily just said, you know what, I'm gonna go to sleep. It's 10 o'clock. I'm gonna sleep for the next 12 hours now and barely get up even for Shachrit, maybe even, and just go into the state of. But I said no. I need to be Baki B'Shov. I need to be expert in returning. That to know that Hashem is here, right near with me. So what did I do? I decided instead of sleeping in my bed to take a nap on the couch. And my wife said to me, David, why don't you go to sleep? I said, no, I want to learn. He goes, but you don't feel well. I said, I know I don't feel well, but I'm just going to take a quick nap. Bezrat Hashem, when I feel better, I'm going to learn a little bit. It's going to make me feel better. And I forced myself there, and I'm like laying down thinking to myself, if I wake up and I don't feel good, this is a huge mistake. And then I strengthened myself. And I said, Hashem, you're the one who caused this to happen to me. You are stronger than this. If you want, when I wake up in 20 minutes, despite the fact that for the past 3 hours you took me to hell and back, if you want, when I wake up, I'm going to feel great. And I'm going to be able to learn and to connect and to get closer to you, bedafka from this space. I said, I believe more in you than what I've been going through for the past 4 hours, 5 hours. All of the downs, all of the struggle, all of the anger and all of the confusion and every place that I just got brought to that I don't want to be in that space. I didn't try to be in that space. It just like a windfall just happened to me. And now I'm laying on the couch. I said, Hashem, you have to wake me up that I feel good when I wake up so I can run to you. And I woke up 20 minutes later and Baruch Hashem, I felt fine. And I started spending the next 3 hours learning. And it was a different learning. And when I woke up the next morning, I had Ibo to do during the day. And I was literally saying thank you to Hashem. Like realizing even my own thoughts, if Hashem wants, I'll lose them. Even my things that are natural to me, like not getting angry, like being happy, being calm. That if Hashem wants in one moment, He could just take it from you. And even though that sounds very scary, the truth is, it brings you a whole new appreciation for that everything is a gift. And not to waste time and not to take things for granted, even qualities about yourself you had your whole life that, so to speak, you've been gifted with, that you see other people struggle with, not to think you're going to have that forever. That if Hashem wants to, He could just remove it. And that night was so scary for me. If you just imagine, you could think to yourself, what if I'm going to be like this the rest of my life? You just start to, what if my mind is going to be gone forever now? What if I'm never going to go back to myself, right? And you start not being an expert in returning. You let the wave cause you to get so scared, you run off the ocean completely, right? And I refuse to let myself, because I know this too well, because I've been on this journey now, thank God, for a while with Rabbi Nachman, to know that this is just a time of returning. And ein shum yerush ba'olam kol, there's no such thing as despair. It's a time to strengthen my emunah in Hashem, not to retreat. And as a result of that, I had a tremendous aliyah this Shabbat. And I learned with new eyes, and I learned with a new heart, and I prayed with a new mind, I prayed with a new life force and gratitude. Why? Because b'tsar b'chaftali, through the constriction, I found an expanse. But dafka, through sitting in hell for a few hours, I found Hashem in a bigger way than I had before. Okay? So this is the concept of running and returning in a practical way. The only reason I'm bringing it is just to, first of all, show you everyone's going through this. Anybody who wants to be close to Hashem has to go through these things. Even me, that I've been spending hours upon hours from day until night poring over Rabbi Nachman's teachings, learning them incessantly for the past half a decade, teaching them to others. I'm still running and returning all the time. It doesn't mean like it used to be that I would go into years and years of depression where I can't get up in my bed. Now, thank God, with Hashem's help and with the guidance of Rabbi Nachman, I know now it's a time of shov. And I've become much more expert, thank God, of dealing with the lows, so that now it doesn't, those 4 or 5 hours doesn't turn in the next week, into the next month, into the next year. It's that, and that's it, okay? But I'm going through it also, so we're all together in this. And this is what it looks like, so to speak. And obviously you can put yourself in there in any situation that you want, okay? So let's see what questions we have over here on the chat, and then we'll take questions live. Who is Hashem? Loaded question. Okay, and what does he have to do with my friends or us talking to each other, or just me being alone? So Rabbi Nachman explains in Likutei Moharan that for a person to connect to Hashem, and he speaks about this a lot, obviously, he needs to have ikashru with the tzaddik. He needs to have genuine attachment with a real spiritual guide, with a real spiritual master. Now, while you might think that he's speaking about one singular figure, Rabbi Nachman goes on to explain, a lot of people don't know this, he's not just speaking about the tzaddik of the generation, that's one point of it. But really the point of the tzaddik, it finds itself in 3 different places, Rabbi Nachman says. The point of the tzaddik finds itself in the tzaddik ador, whoever is the tzaddik of the generation. It also finds itself within you. You also have the point of the tzaddik within you. Every Jewish man and woman has this nakuda of tzaddik or tzaddikah within them. For them to connect to Hashem be'emet, in truth, they need to connect to that point of the tzaddik within themselves. And finally, there is a third point of the tzaddik that they need to connect to, and that's within their friend. Rabbi Nachman says a person every single day, he needs to spend time with these 3 points. He needs to spend time with the tzaddik of the generation. That's the point of the general tzaddik. Then he needs to spend time with the point of the tzaddik within himself. And finally, he needs to spend time with a friend, that he gets the point of the tzaddik within him. Now, what does that mean practically? It means like this. What we just did now is we spent an hour with the tzaddik, okay? That's the tzaddik emet. We spent an hour with a true spiritual master. Okay? So, Baruch Hashem, we're yotze. We have now spent 1 hour with the tzaddik ador. Very good. But now we have 2 more points that we have to connect to today. Either if it's nighttime by you, then when you wake up tomorrow, or if you have energy now to do it, you can do it now. That is to connect to the tzaddik within yourself, and to connect to the tzaddik that's within your friend. Connecting to the tzaddik within yourself, Rabbi Nachman says, how do you do it? He bodedut. Okay? I know people get tired of hearing about it, but you're going to hear even more about it right now. That is, how do you find the point of the tzaddik within yourself? You need to talk to it, Rabbi Nachman says. It's not just about talking to Hashem. You're talking to the point of the tzaddik or tzaddikah inside of yourself. Because when you speak to Hashem from the bottom of your heart, what part of you is going to get illuminated? Rabbi Nachman says the tzaddik inside of you is going to become illuminated. Why is it that you see that Breslover Hasidim can go from being in gangs, can go from being in jail, can go from 10 years of addiction to all of a sudden a few years later, they look like malachim, they look like angels. They look like they have literally traversed from one world to another world entirely. How did they grow so much in such a short period of time? And everyone's going to tell you the same answer. Every single day I talk to Hashem for an hour a day. Why does that help a person so much? Because the whole reason a person is struggling, and to the degree that they're struggling, is because they have a point of the tzaddik inside of themselves. To the degree to which they have a strong point within them, to that degree they're going to struggle. What happens is through the struggle, they lose connection to that point. That point goes into exile, into hiding. We're going to see that in some ways this is the lost princess, okay? But by talking to Hashem, you're actually talking to that point inside of yourself. That point becomes illuminated. If you can imagine like a fire, it starts to illuminate a point. The charcoal start to glow and glimmer. That's happening to the point inside of you. And now you have the inspiration to be able to run to Hashem, and you have the hope and the strength, the resolution to not move backwards when you go through challenges in your life. So that's the point of the tzaddik within yourself. You do that through Hispodedus. So if you do that later today, if you're in Israel, if you do that tonight, if you're in America, so that you connect to the point of the tzaddik within yourself. And then finally, there's the point of the tzaddik within your friend. How do you get that? So this is one of the main reasons that I created the Chabur, and why I'm so happy about what took place this week. That in the men's and the women's group, everybody was giving forth what was inside of them. How they responded to last week's class. What they thought about what they heard. How they're applying it in their life right now. This, Rabbi Nachman says, is called the point of the tzaddik within your friend. What he terms sichot chaverim, conversation with friends. Those conversations were not about the news. Those conversations were not about LeBron James' last box score, okay? Or your fantasy football team. What does Rabbi Nachman say is a real friend? Someone who's bederech, someone who's on the journey with you, even if you don't know them, even if you don't know them from a hole in the wall, and they're on the other side of the world. When they tell you about their journey and you're on the same journey, that's called talking to a real friend, okay? So Bezrat Hashem, after this class is over, if you want to speak during the week, tonight, or during the week, about thoughts that you had from this class, or about you trying to apply what you're learning so far, that is called Sichot Averim. That's called speaking to your friend that day. This we need to have every single day. Rabbi Nachman says when you speak or when you connect to the tzaddik at these three levels, then you're going to know who Hashem is. Okay? Then you're going to connect to Hashem. So that's what it has to do with talking to others, talking to being alone, and talking to Hashem, being a friend. Another question. I so needed to hear that. I feel like it's Hashem talking to me. I always wondered how being expert in both actually looked practically. So really amazing. Hear it in this way. Can you give us an actual example of what both Baki Beratzo, Baki B'Shov actually looks like? With a practical example of a difficulty, how to go through descending, the Aliyah merges, evolves, an example that's okay. So I gave one before. I'll give you another example. When I was going through the worst of the worst, when I was in my living Gehenna, where I was in my bed for years crying from depression, and my wife had to support me and our kids in a foreign country, and there's no words to speak about this. Even if I talked to you guys about it for hours, I wouldn't be able to tell you what I went through. It was real hell. So I remembered what Rabbi Nachman taught, that when a person is struggling with something, he says that to the degree that he struggles with it, to that degree he has a koach, a spiritual ability or power in the area that he's struggling to the opposite degree. And that's the whole reason he's struggling with it. So this is a big paradigm shift. Why does Rabbi Nachman say that I've struggled with depression since I've been 10 years old? And why in the past few years it's completely knocked me out of life? Because to the opposite degree, I have a capacity of a koach for simcha, for joy. Now, I would never believe it. And going to therapists my whole life, speaking to psychiatrists, I obviously have a genetic disorder. This is something I'm going to have to deal with my whole life. I'm never going to be able to not be depressed. It's just going to be about managing the symptoms. And Rabbi Nachman says, no, it's a sword to be said. You're not allowed to. What do you mean you're not allowed to? I've been said my whole life. How can you not be allowed to? How could Hashem create me in a way that's I'm incapable of not being like this? Oh, so obviously Rabbi Nachman believes that I am capable of not being sad. So all of a sudden he's going completely against all modern science and psychiatry. Very good. So in the beginning you're like, yeah, I don't really believe that, but this is the only thing that's giving me hope, so I continue. But then all of a sudden you see that the different things that Rabbi Nachman says to do, to try, to learn, they all work. And when they all start to work, then even when you hear things that are unbelievable, you start to think to yourself, maybe I just haven't experienced this yet, but it's true. And I started contemplating, even in my bed, crying, maybe I have a tremendous capacity for joy. Maybe even though I feel so weak, weaker than anybody that I know, I have a capacity to be stronger than anybody I know. And I was laying down in my bed, and I remember a big turning point was when I said to Hashem, instead of me wallowing in it, I held on for the first time at 26, 27, 28 years old. And I said with tears in my eyes, Hashem, I'm in hell right now. And I can't imagine ever leaving this place, even though I want to so desperately. And I really need you. And Rabbi Nachman says that the reason I'm struggling so much right now is because I have the capacity for the opposite. The reason I've struggled so much with depression is because even more than a person who was never sad, I have a capacity for joy that nobody else has. And that the fact that I'm so weak, and I've been so weak for so long now, and I feel so incapable of dealing with all the different trials and tribulations of my life, never more so than right now, to the extent that I actually don't think I'm going to get out of this place. But it must be that from this point itself, I have the strength to get out of it, otherwise you wouldn't bring me here. And I said to Hashem out loud, if that's the case, that I'm going to leave this place because I'm strong enough to leave hell and live a good life, then in potential, I must be the strongest person in the whole friggin' world, even though I feel like the weakest person in the world. That's becoming Baki B'Shov, become an expert in returning. That's called holding on and realizing that Hashem is there with you. And that was the beginning of me leaving that place. To realize that I was not a victim of my circumstances, but my circumstances were actually a window into the depths of the strength of my soul. And now to look back to that space now, not only leaving that place, but in this group itself, you have people from 4 different continents who are learning how to be close to Hashem, how to be happy. From the same person who just 6 years ago couldn't get out of bed from depression, checking himself into a psych ward, through living with these teachings for a half a decade and teaching them, is now trying to teach people how to be happy across the world. How is that possible? Because Rabbi Nachman says, to the extent that you struggle with something, it's not because you actually don't have ability in that place. It's adrabah, it's the opposite. Wherever you struggle the most, to that degree you have the power to ultimately experience a greater revelation of the opposite of that place. Like in Kabbalah they explain that before there is a pri, there's a fruit, there's always a klipa, there is a shell. So all of the struggles that a person goes through is actually only a klipa to the fruit that's in there. And the greater the klipa, the greater the shell, it only is because the fruit is sweeter on the inside. How do you unpeel the fruit so that you're able to taste it? By first knowing that there's fruit there. First acknowledging that despite the fact that this is taking place to me, and maybe it's been taking place to me my whole life, but it's a klipa. And to the degree to which it's been intense and difficult for me, to that degree the fruit on the inside is sweeter. Just knowing that itself is the beginning of leaving. So this is called the becoming rutso in returning. What does it look like to become rutso in running? To be baki in running? So in the past, when I felt good, I used to relax because I never feel good. So finally, when I start to feel good, I hang out with a friend. I'll get a Mike's Hard Lemonade and chill out laying in the sun. I'll start watching 10 hours of YouTube videos of random sports and movie highlights, and just move into a state of complete vegetable-like status Why? Because thank God I feel like a potato at this point. Before this, I was like burning in hell. So now, just to feel like a potato is so comfortable. It's so nice. I just want to sit here. But now I know that when I start to feel good, and somebody texts me, let's say like an article or a video, this is a test. This is a nisayon. It's not the time for me now to just chill. Now is the time for me to run. So I'll b'davka not look at the article. I won't look at the message, and I'll go start talking to Hashem. I'll go start learning another lesson in Likutei Moharan. I'll go start. I'll speak to a friend about how to get closer to Hashem. I'll encourage them. They'll encourage me. I'll run. That's called running. When you become expert in both, you're going to be able to create a path. How do you come to believe the path of Torah, mitzvot, tefillah, sense it, feel it more in my heart so that I can do it, invest more in it? What if I just don't believe in the path and therefore I don't do it? I only feel the heart sometimes, the shul with some songs, tefillahs, but none of it really in everything so much during work or whatever when I'm alone. So thank you for the honesty. I think a lot of people feel that. That's the reason why we're doing this chabur, teaching Rabbi Nachman's stories. There's a person in this group who literally came up to me at the end of this week who said he read The Lost Princess and tried to prepare for this class. And he said that literally he's been looking for this his whole life. That these stories awaken something within a person, a belief, a hope, that is not only abstract, it's not only theoretical, but that there's a real capability for me to feel this all the time, to really connect to Hashem. So all I would say is, hold on, brother. Just stay with us. We just started the Chabura. If you keep coming to the Chabura, and during the week, you do your best to actualize what we learn in the class, which today was about becoming expert in running and returning, turning it into tefillah, right? Going into your ibodedut and asking Hashem, please, begging Hashem that you should become very stubborn, that when you are able to run, you run, and when you're able to return, you return, and you don't fall down further. And then as you keep taking different pieces each week and bringing it into your life, then you're going to be able to see that Hashem for you is not some theoretical reality, but He's going to feel more real to you even than people, places, and things. And this is what Rabbi Nachman is trying to get us to. So just keep going. How does one pray when he is heartbroken and not in depression? How does he keep brokenheartedness in constant tefillah? So good question. Rabbi Nachman teaches in Sichot Aram because his students had the same question. They didn't understand how on the one hand Rabbi Nachman exhorted his students to never enter into sadness and to do whatever they could to avoid depression, because he said it's the most harmful, most destructive, not just psychological entity, but spiritual entity. And it completely knocks you out from feeling closeness to Hashem and growing closer to Him. And therefore Rabbi Nachman, to the nth degree, said you need to do whatever it takes, obviously in a kosher way, to make sure that you never enter into a state of depression. And if you are there, to do whatever you can to leave, okay? On the other hand, Rabbi Nachman says there's nothing sweeter in the world, there's nothing better, there's nothing more productive, there's nothing more transformative than when you're in tefillah and when you're in hispodedus, that you pour your heart out to Hashem like a baby who's crying and has no ability to speak, he can't talk, and he's just crying and crying for what he needs. How do I do that? I thought you told me I have to be happy. Okay, so Rabbi Nachman explains like this. There is a big difference between being brokenhearted and being sad. This is a very fundamental point. This is something that completely changed my life, in fact, and will change anybody's life who takes it to heart. The one difference between atzvut, depression, and a leiv nishbar, a broken heart, is what's called yeush, despair. If when I come to pray to Hashem, I'm crying because I don't believe that Hashem can help me, I don't even believe He's listening to me, I don't believe that He cares about me, I don't believe that He loves me, I don't believe He wants the best for me, and therefore I'm praying from that space, and then afterwards I feel more sad, I feel more confused, I feel more scared. So that's called atzvut, that's called sadness. Rabbi Nachman says you need to stay as far away from this as possible. Okay, so then how do I cry to Hashem in my tefillah like a child if I can't enter into this state of despair? So the answer is, you can cry from hope. You can cry from longing. That even though I am not experiencing the good that Rabbi Nachman is speaking about, even though that the teachings that I learned in the Torah about tzaddikim and the teachings that I'm learning in Chassidut now are speaking about this beautiful relationship I can have with you, how much you love me, how much you believe in me, how much you want good for me, how everything you're doing in my life is only to bring me closer to you, how you're always thinking about me, how to help me, right? But I believe that could be. It could be that that's true. And I'm praying from that space. Then all of a sudden, where am I crying from? I'm not crying from despair, but I'm crying from longing. Hashem, you want me to be married, right? You asked me to go get married, but I can't find somebody to marry. And even the person I'm married to, I don't feel like we're married, or we got divorced, right? So, but you told me you want me to be. So you're not crying from the fact that Hashem cannot bring you a zivug, right? Because that's yeyus, that's despair. And Rabbi Nachman says it's asur. Like, just like treif, you're not allowed to eat not kosher food, you're not allowed to engage in that thought that Hashem can't help you. That's not true. But you're crying from longing. Hashem, I want what you want. I want this, right? You said you want me to be happy. You said to serve you b'simcha. You want this for me. I want this for me, but I don't have joy. And I'm crying not from despair. I'm crying for longing because I want joy. I want to be happy because you want me to be happy, right? In that place, Rabbi Nachman says, this is called a leiv nishbar. This is a broken heart. And now Rabbi Nachman says, what's the proof that I prayed from a broken heart and not from depression? If I feel better afterwards. If after I'm done praying from that place, I feel relief, I feel a weight lifted off of me, that's called I prayed with a broken heart. But if after I'm done praying, I'm in a greater sense of despair, I'm in a greater sense of confusion, so there's a good chance that you prayed from a place of atzvut, from sadness, and this is very difficult to move beyond, to get through. And this is what Rabbi Nachman exhorted us to stay away from as much as possible. I don't really have friends to talk to about this. You do now, okay? If you're a man, you have a tik yomin, you have a group, and these are real friends, people on the journey together. If you're a woman, you have the lost princess, finding the lost princess, okay? A real friend is not what we think it means. It's not the person that we grew up with that knows everything about me. Rabbi Nachman says it's not a real friend. Who's a real friend? Someone who's baderech, someone who has the conviction, who's had the strength to go on the same journey as me, to find Hashem despite everything they've been through in their life. In 2022, when the whole world is not busy with anything like this, that if I'm in Israel, I got up at 4 a.m. to listen to this. If I'm in America, instead of going out to a party, it's I'm learning a class about a story that was told 200 years ago. Yeah, you're bederech, you're on the path, okay? Speak to the people in the group about what's going on. And with this, you'll be speaking to friends. Someone said, what about working out to feel in the shul? But for day to day, I find nothing works if I don't do proper workouts multiple times per week. So everyone needs to know themselves. You know, part of doing hibodedut is coming to the realization of what helps you and what works for you and what doesn't work for you. It's actually a very big part of it. This is something that the Ramchal speaks about in the beginning of his farm, that he says explicitly that a person cannot climb the ladder of Kedusha to get close to Hashem without time alone. Why? Because it's only when you're alone that you can have a clear mind, and it's only when one has a clear mind he can actually make decisions on what's really good for him and what is actually not good for him, and then living with that reality. So for instance, for me, I know that if I don't have 1 hour every day that I talk to Hashem, I start to feel very bad and dysfunctional. Okay, some people, they like doing hibodedut, or after they feel like they did the right thing, but it's like, I could do okay without it. I don't feel like that. If I don't do it, I learned many times the hard way, I'm not functional. So I make myself do it. I force myself to do it. My wife knows about it. She helps me to do it. And it took a long time to get to that point. My family knows about it. My parents know about it. I let everybody know. I'm sick if I don't do an hour of Yibo to do it. I need to find a way today to do it, no matter what it is, no matter how it looks. So that's about knowing yourself, right? Let's say a person says, I can't function unless I sit in the sun for half an hour every day. So you have to go sit in the sun for half an hour every day. It's a mitzvah gedola. You have to go do that, right? And this is something that I do as well. I feel sad if I'm not in the sun a little bit every day. I feel sad if I don't have a time alone a little bit every day. I also feel sad if I don't have time with people a little bit every day. You have to get to know yourself, know the different parts of yourself, and not resist those different parts the way that Hashem made you. You need to learn to work with the different parts of yourself, to become you to the fullest, to accept who you are, to love who you are with all of your lackings, and to do your best to connect from that space. Yes, Zach, go ahead.
You said that Rabbi Nachman is like the GPS.
Yes.
But I know that the Torah is all instructions on how to live the best life.
Right.
Pretty much. And how is Rabbi Nachman the GPS for the GPS? Shouldn't it be already without tribulations and hardships because I'm living the best life by following the Torah?
Right.
So how do I reconcile that?
Okay, very good. So, Zach, I want you to imagine you're going through a hard period in your life right now. Okay? You found out recently the Torah is true. You went to Israel, let's say, for instance, I don't know if this ever happened to you, but you went to Israel recently, and you came away not convinced that that path was your path, but you came away convinced that the Torah is true. I believe in God now. Beautiful, amazing. You have a zchut that nobody else in the world has. You will go back home. You happen to go back home, right? And now you go through a difficult period that you never experienced in your life. All types of confusions, struggles, trials, tribulations. You never dreamed you'd have these things. And they all hit you at one time. Like not just one wave in an ocean. Every wave in the ocean from all the different oceans came and just subterfuged you, okay? Now I want you to answer to me honestly. Can you pick up the Torah right now and figure out how to get through this? Yes or no?
No.
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 Why not? You have the GPS in front of you.
I don't have anyone to guide the way.
Okay, so that's it. It's for sure, and Rabbi Nachman is not contradicting this reality at all. The Baal Shem Tov is not contradicting this reality at all. The Torah is the path. But where is it? How do I apply the path in my life? This you need tzadikei emet for. This you need true tzaddikim for. Because they have been there, because they paved the way. So they are able to see clearly in a way that we're not. You know, the Gemara says that a prisoner is not capable of releasing himself from prison. Why do I need the Gemara to teach me that? I don't need Torah to teach me that a prisoner can't release himself. Obviously, there's some deep secret, something to contemplate, and it's saying that a prisoner can't release himself from prison. Because we're all prisoners of our circumstances, or not really our circumstances, of our mind, okay? So now, how do I leave behind my prison? The Gemara says you actually can't do it on your own. Why can't you do it on your own? Because you can't see. So what's the concept of the tzaddik? What's the concept of this spiritual guide who is so fluent in the Torah, who has went across the sea and created a path? He can see. He sees why I'm in the prison. He sees what brought me to the prison. He sees how even though it feels like I'm in a cell which cannot be broken through, I can actually, if I just go to the side over there, there's this little Etch-a-Sketch, and if I start making a bridge on the Etch-a-Sketch, I can actually leave this jail cell behind. You would never figure that out on your own, right? So this is the answer to your question. Good question. Yes?
One more question. You said that about Nassan, he had this dream, and he was suffering a lot, and he got the call to go to Rabbi Nachman.
Yeah.
You also spoke about how you have to hold on during difficult times.
Right.
So by seeking out Rabbi Nachman, you also said to not grow and to not fall, to just hold on for dear life. Right.
That's when you're in a period of shov. That's when you're in a period of struggling.
Right. So when Rabbi Nassan was in that period of struggling, he was crying out, "Why am I with these bagels?" And then he went out to see Rabbi Nachman. Was it that not him not holding on, but more seeking growth? How is it?
He didn't know Rabbi Nachman at that point. When he went to go see Rabbi Nachman, yeah, he had an aliyah, meaning he gathered up the courage to go find a deeper truth than he even had, even though he was hoping he had already gotten it, right? So for sure, he mustered something deep inside to be able to do that. But did he know that that's the way he needs to deal with every struggle in his life? No. And Rabbi Nachman Mamish hammered this into his heart and his head, that by the time that Rabbi Nachman passed away, for the next 60 years of his life, Rav Natan literally lived with this reality. Every single time that he went to a difficulty, a struggle, he held on. Every time that he had a free moment and he felt good, he ran to Hashem. It wasn't for him, now he's like a soldier. Before this, it's like he lucked into sometimes doing the right thing, sometimes handling it in the good way, and other times, most of the time, he just was in a state of despair.
So when that came upon him and he didn't hold on and wait for the despair to pass, and he instead went to Rabbi Nachman, that was like a chance of luck, when normally he should have just waited and then went to go.
Right, normally what people would do is because they have journeyed for so long, like Rav Natan had looked for so long and finally got to who's considered the greatest Hasidic master of the generation, Rabbi Ditchev. So many people in that situation, getting the bagels, would not get up from that dream and go visit a new rabbi at that point. They would stay by Rav Levi and they'd say, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep looking. It's too painful. Right? I haven't found it yet. Everyone tells me this is the truth. Okay, so I'll stay here. Right? And Rav Natan forced himself not to give up. Obviously, that was a prelude to what would be his whole life. But everyone needs this to some extent. Everyone touches this on their own at some points in their life. But it's Rabbi Nachman that causes this to become your modus operandi. That every single time you go through a different situation, you're going to know exactly how to deal. You're not going to be like grasping at straws. You're going to know, oh, this is running. Oh, this is returning. Oh, this is this. Oh, this is that. And as time goes on, when you're praying on it every day and you're trying to bring it into your life, you're going to see that you become a spiritual warrior. And you're going to get very close to Hashem. Okay? Someone said, how do you know Chabad, Tanya, Lubavitch Rebbe is not more of a personal guide to attach to the Rabbi Nachman in terms of top of top? Okay. This is the last question we'll do for the day, and then Bezrat Hashem we can continue to connect through through our Chabura groups that we have, and we'll meet next week, Bezrat Hashem. Everybody, every day in their Hibodedut needs to pray to what Rabbi Nachman calls the point of truth. The Arizal brings down that every generation has a Moshe Rabbeinu, has a soul in which he has brought forth unique teachings that had not existed prior to them being there. And these teachings are exactly what that generation needs in order to be close to Hashem, in order to be able to overcome their challenges in their life. And Rabbi Nachman says that the most important thing that a person can do in his life, and he's not being grandiose, he's not trying to exaggerate, is to find that point of truth and to connect himself with everything that he has. Like it says about Yoshua ben Nun, that he never left the tent of Moshe. Once he found Moshe, he never let go. Whether he was feeling good or he wasn't feeling good, whether he was succeeding or whether he was failing, whether Moshe was alive or even after he passed away, he never left his tent anymore. He connected to this point of truth, and he stuck with that point of truth the rest of his life. Okay? Rabbi Nachman says that this is the most important thing that a person can do. How do I do that? How do I know who that is? Right? So the first thing that a person needs to do is every single day, you need to pray and beg Hashem that He should bring you to the ultimate point of truth. Not just the truth, the emet, but the emet lamito, the truth of truth. To the extent that Rav Natan, even after he met Rabbi Nachman, only because it's not that he didn't think he finally found it, he knew that he did. But for him, because Rabbi Nachman said he needs to pray for this, so every day in his Hibodedut, he would beg Hashem to find the emet lamito, the truth of truth. But he already found it. No, Rabbi Nachman says not enough. You have to continue every day to search for this point of truth and to reattach yourself to it, okay? So how do you know, or how do you find him? First thing is, just like if you want a zivu, you want to get married, just like you want to have kids, just like you want to overcome the different challenges in your life, just like you want to be able to support your family or yourself, everyone has dreams and hopes in their life. How do you pray for those things? Rabbi Nachman says that's important. But you know what's even more important than that? Finding the tzaddik emet, finding the true tzaddik, finding the point of truth in the generation. Even more important. Okay? So how should I pray for that? Beg every day. And if you're sincere about it and you don't give up on it, Hashem is going to have rachamim, and He's going to look down, and He's going to help you either find that point of truth or help you realize it's been in front of your face the whole time. Okay? So that's one point. Another point is, how do I know once I found it that this is it? So they asked Rav Natan this. He spoke about it in the Kutei Halachot. It's based on something that Rabbi Nachman said, which is that when you hear from a true tzaddik, you feel yeshuv das. You feel tranquility of mind. That prior to hearing his teachings, you feel chaos. You feel emotional turbulence. You feel your thoughts are in disorder. You feel that your actions are destructive, right? You feel like you're hurting yourself. You don't know what's going on. Rabbi Nachman says, you want to know who the tzaddik emet is? If every time you hear his lessons, you achieve yeshuv das. You just have like a settling of the mind. You know, your situation didn't change at all, but somehow he took me in this state of challenge, of difficulty, and my mind went from being completely flustered to like, oh, I can do this. Like, oh, this is a part of life, huh? Like, this has more meaning than I thought it did. And all of a sudden my mind becomes settled. The tzaddik emet, he brings you to yeshuv das. The way that Rav Natan explains this practically is like, for instance, all week it's crazy, right? You're going to work, you're getting ready for Shabbat, you're doing all these different things with your family, with your friends, and at work, on your own, and it's always going up and down, up and down, up and down. But all of a sudden you light the candles and Shabbat comes in. There's no more work to do. I can't cook even if I wanted to. I can't do all these different things. Now is just the time for me to settle into whatever it is that I built. And I can just get into this space of connection, of feeling Hashem's taking care of me, even though during the week it was crazy and I didn't feel like that. And even though next week I still have to deal with it. But somehow on Shabbat I feel this tranquility of mind. I can, theoretically. So Rav Natan says it's the same thing by the tzaddik emet. When you are in a desert and you don't have a watch on you, right? You don't know when Shabbat is. He says even that person, if he's spiritually attuned, then when Shabbat comes, he's just going to feel, this is Shabbat. So too, when a person reaches and connects to the point of truth, he's going to be like, this is Shabbat. This is called closeness to Hashem. This is called peace of mind. This is called real clarity and wisdom. This is real advice. This is real hope. This is real guidance. This is something I could live my whole life with. This is the truth, okay? So, Bezrat Hashem, I'm not going to say Rabbi Nachman versus this. Everyone on their own needs to come to their point of truth, needs to come to know who that point is on their own, needs to pray for that point on their own. Hashem needs to help that person. You know, Rabbi Nachman used to say when somebody came up to him, oh, you're so great, then why can't you just convince me that God exists? Oh, everyone says your students are like going on and on about you. Oh, so like, why don't you just tell me? I don't believe in God. Why don't you just show me? And he said, you don't think that I can take away your free will? I could do it like this. But far from the servant to be different than his master. What was he saying? Hashem could do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. But he allows us to have bechira, free will, that we should be able to choose to find Hashem. Why doesn't he just reveal himself to us? Because it would take away your free will. What was Rabbi Nachman saying to him? You always have to have free will. You think that I can't just show you who I am right now? I could. But you have to figure it out on your own. Okay? So Bezrat Hashem, I'm going to continue praying for all of you, that you should all find the point of truth in your life, and this is something that you should pray for as well. I hope everybody has an amazing week, and let's connect in the groups, talk about again, what was it from this class that resonated with you the most? What was a question that came from this? What was a solution that came from this? What was something that you came to work with now? Talk about living with it, baderech, on the road with the teaching itself during the week. What was that like? Encourage each other. And Bezrat Hashem will, with our Etch-a-Sketch, we'll have created a little bit more of a bridge. So by the next time we come back, we have started to create a path into this ocean of godliness, okay? Everybody have a great week.